The phone rests inside a clear evidence bag. At first glance, it looks ordinary, unremarkable. But during the investigation, that phone became a timeline. A silent witness that contradicted the story the owner had sworn to. She said she stayed home all night. She said she never left her apartment, but technology doesn't forget. And neither do timestamps. The Redfield Apartment Case began as a welfare check. The victim hadn't been heard from for hours. Emergency calls were placed. Neighbors reported a quiet evening. The girlfriend insisted she had been inside all night. She described a normal evening, nothing unusual. Early police interviews took her statements at face value. Investigators began collecting digital evidence. The phone was seized under a warrant, along with call and location logs, bank transaction records, and surveillance footage. Early in the investigation, everything seemed consistent with her story. No alerts, no messages, no geofencing triggers suggested she left. Until forensic analysts extracted the metadata. Metadata doesn't lie. It records every connection, every ping. And on the night in question, one ping refused to align with her statements. According to forensic testimony presented in court, her device connected to a cell tower near the victim's address at 3:12 a.m. Not her apartment. Not along a route back home, just there. At the scene, investigators were now beginning to examine more closely. That single data point became the pivot of the case. Forensic analysts explained in testimony how cell tower triangulation works. Devices communicate with the nearest tower. Even brief connections leave logs. The ping didn't show duration, it didn't show activity, but it proved location. At a time she claimed to be elsewhere. Investigators layered that evidence against her statements. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and background data transmissions. Court filings indicate that her device showed minimal activity before 3:12 a.m. This was consistent with phone use at home. Then came the unexpected tower ping. Silence again until morning. The timeline contradicted the narrative of being inside the apartment all night. The prosecution's case didn't rely on speculation. They reconstructed a minute-by-minute timeline. This included when she claimed to be in bed, when the victim was last seen, when her device connected to the network near his address. Each step supported the same conclusion. Her story didn't match the digital record. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. No one watched her walk away. There were no cameras inside the apartment showing movement, but that single metadata point created a conflict that couldn't be ignored. The system's impartial memory conflicted with her sworn account. Once the discrepancy was identified, investigators expanded their review. They looked at location data for surrounding devices. They checked timestamps on connected Wi-Fi networks. They examined background app activity. Each piece reinforced the same fact. The phone had been somewhere it shouldn't have been, according to her story. By morning, the evidence painted a quiet but undeniable picture. A routine object, a phone, recorded a brief but crucial movement at 3:12 a.m. Technology doesn't forget. Systems don't misremember. And in court, forensic testimony made that point repeatedly. One digital trace can undo an alibi when all other claims rest on memory alone. The pivot had occurred in a single line of metadata, and from that moment, the investigation shifted from uncertainty to reconstruction, mapping every subsequent movement, every opportunity, and every gap. The phone inside the evidence bag became the anchor of truth that no story could overwrite. Once investigators had established that 3:12 a.m. tower ping, the Redfield Apartment Case entered a new phase. They weren't chasing rumors anymore. They were reconstructing a night, minute by minute, through objective data. The forensic team expanded the timeline, overlaying cell tower logs, Wi-Fi connections, and background data from multiple devices in the building. Every signal, every system ping, became a point on a chronological map. Court filings later detailed how the prosecution used these records to show a sequence of movement. Her phone connected to the tower near the victim's address at 3:12 a.m., remained inactive for the following hour, then reappeared on the home network shortly after sunrise. Investigators noted that this pattern conflicted sharply with her claim of remaining inside her apartment all night. It wasn't circumstantial, it was documented through multiple independent systems. Call logs and background app activity were cross-referenced to validate the timeline. Investigators looked for automated connections or potential system errors. Carrier records confirmed that the tower connections were genuine and not due to routing anomalies. Metadata corroborated the same window repeatedly. In digital forensics, repeated independent logs strengthen the validity of a single pivot point. And in this case, the pivot point was the 3:12 a.m. connection. The defense argued that cell tower pings could be approximate, and that urban coverage areas sometimes overlap. Prosecutors acknowledged the margin of error but emphasized the convergence of evidence. Call and APP metadata, the sequence of inactive and active periods, and her own statements. Together, the digital footprint was consistent and contradicted the alleged alibi. Investigators also reviewed surrounding apartment complex surveillance. Nothing definitively showed her entering or leaving a vehicle, nothing caught on cameras within the building itself. But the absence of visual confirmation didn't weaken the case. The digital record was objective. Every signal a device generates is logged, every connection time-stamped, and unlike human memory, it doesn't alter over time. The timeline reconstruction was painstaking. Analysts mapped every relevant ping. They plotted the duration of inactivity. They aligned it against the victim's last known movements. Court testimony explained how small data points form a comprehensive picture. When a device is idle, when it connects, and where those connections occur. Even minimal interactions contribute to establishing location history. Once the sequence was clear, investigators focused on reconciling her account with the digital record. Discrepancies weren't dramatic gestures or confrontations. They were quiet misalignments. A single statement didn't match a system log. A claimed location contradicted by metadata. That's what forensic analysts testified to repeatedly. Technology doesn't forget. Even a small alibi slip leaves a trace. By the time the case proceeded to trial, the prosecution emphasized these documented timelines. Jurors saw visual reconstructions, a simple map showing her apartment, the victim's address, and the location of the 3:12 a.m. ping. Lines represented device movement. Gaps represented inactivity. The narrative wasn't sensationalized. It was chronological, objective, and verifiable. The 3:12 a.m. ping became the anchor for the investigation. Every subsequent question returned to that singular point in time. Forensic testimony tied each detail back to it. Without that data, the investigation would have relied on inconsistent human recollections. With it, the case had structure. Ultimately, the digital evidence proved pivotal. It showed that she was somewhere she claimed not to be. Her account could not be reconciled with independent systems. Her alibi was false. In Redfield, Nevada, technology had recorded a movement that no story could overwrite. That single trace reshaped the investigation. It forced reconstruction of a night once thought straightforward. After the 3:12 a.m. ping was established, investigators reconstructed the remaining hours of that night. Phone metadata, app activity, and Wi-Fi logs formed a continuous chain that highlighted patterns and gaps. The device's inactivity for the next hour allowed forensic analysts to anchor a timeline for the morning. Each connection, each brief signal, became a waypoint in a sequence that contradicted her initial statements. Court testimony emphasized that this wasn't speculation. Each entry was backed by system logs and verified carrier timestamps. Analysts explained how modern smartphones generate automatic pings with cell towers, even when idle. These logs, they testified, cannot be manually altered without leaving additional traces. This impartiality gave the digital record substantial weight against her verbal account. Investigators overlaid the metadata with other available documentation. Surveillance footage from nearby streets was cross-referenced with the ping to identify vehicles in proximity. While no camera directly recorded her movement, the absence of conflicting evidence reinforced the credibility of the metadata. Bank transaction timestamps and ride-hailing app logs were examined and found consistent with the timeline. Defense arguments focused on potential inaccuracies in cell tower data. Prosecutors countered by demonstrating that the convergence of multiple independent logs created a consistent, continuous picture. The 3:12 a.m. connection was just the pivot. It tied together the narrative of the night and revealed the discrepancy. The investigation then shifted toward reconstructing intent and context. Digital forensic analysts examined the patterns of activity before and after the ping. They looked at how long the device remained connected to the cell tower near the victim's address. This analysis allowed investigators to establish presence without requiring direct observation. In court, experts explained how these brief, automated communications are often overlooked. Prosecution timelines presented during trial illustrated that her account of remaining in the apartment was inconsistent. The narrative unfolded in hours and minutes, showing that the phone was elsewhere. Cross-referencing with the victim's last known activities reinforced the pivotal nature of that single 3:12 a.m. signal. By the time evidence was fully presented, the jury could see how technology captured critical details. The phone inside the evidence bag wasn't just a device, it was a record keeper. The pivot point, one location ping, became the lens through which every subsequent movement was understood. From there, the focus shifted to corroborating all digital evidence and solidifying the narrative for court. Every minute accounted for, every anomaly explained. By the conclusion of the trial, the phone in the evidence bag had become the cornerstone of the case. Jurors didn't rely on speculation or emotional testimony. They relied on metadata, the 3:12 a.m. ping, the gaps of inactivity, the reconnection to the home network at dawn. Each entry reinforced the narrative that her stated alibi did not align with the objective record. Forensic experts testified repeatedly about how smartphones generate immutable logs. Even brief automated pings to nearby towers are recorded, time-stamped, and centralized by carriers. The defense acknowledged the technical validity of these systems, but emphasized margin of error and potential network anomalies. Prosecutors responded by showing convergence. Multiple independent logs, including app background activity and Wi-Fi reconnections, all corroborated the same sequence. The jury was presented with visual timelines, overlaying her statements against the digital record. Every dot, every line corresponded to a verifiable moment, and the discrepancy was clear. The case's resolution wasn't about a dramatic reveal or physical confrontation. It was about the alignment of data and human behavior. The prosecution argued that her presence outside the apartment at 3:12 a.m., combined with the continuity of the digital record, created a factual conflict with her sworn statements. The court examined the full sequence, mapping the device's movements in parallel with investigative findings and reports, creating a timeline that could not be reconciled with her claim of staying home. Sentencing documents emphasized that technology had acted as a silent arbiter. The phone, an ordinary-looking object, had recorded a deviation that human memory and statements could not explain away. Investigators reconstructed the night step by step, and the pattern told a consistent story. It was neither sensational nor dramatic. It was chronological and verifiable. After conviction, the focus turned to procedural review and policy reflection. Law enforcement agencies noted how a single digital trace can pivot an investigation. A cell tower ping can force a reevaluation of statements taken at face value. Forensic procedures were updated to ensure that device metadata is routinely considered. This is crucial when alibis are disputed, highlighting the role of technology in verifying narratives. The lasting impact of the Redfield Apartment case isn't just the legal outcome. It's a record of how objective data can reveal truth in the absence of eyewitnesses. The phone inside the evidence bag doesn't dramatize events. It doesn't convey emotion. It only records presence, timing, and sequence. And in this case, that was enough to dismantle an alibi. Ultimately, what was permanently lost isn't captured in dramatic footage or witness accounts. It is the trust in a statement, the belief that what someone said matched what occurred. Time, opportunity, and accountability were measured against impartial logs. That single 3:12 a.m. ping changed the investigation, reshaped the timeline. It anchored the court's understanding of the night in evidence that cannot lie. The phone remains sealed, a quiet witness to a night in Redfield, Nevada in 2020. Technology doesn't forget, and when the night was reconstructed, every system confirmed what one small device had recorded. She had not been home.